Clara was 24 years old when she realized that dreams don't always work out the way you plan them. She had spent her whole childhood believing she would become a famous pianist. Her mother used to tell her that her fingers were made for the keys, that music lived inside her like a second heartbeat. And for a long time, Clara believed it too. She grew up in a small apartment in Brooklyn with her mother. They didn't have much money, but they had an old piano that her grandmother had left behind. It was out of tune and some of the keys stuck, but to Clara, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Every evening after school, she would sit at that piano and play until her mother called her for dinner. The neighbors never complained. In fact, they often told her mother how much they loved hearing the music through the walls. When Clara turned 18, she got accepted into one of the best music schools in New York. It felt like a miracle. Her mother cried when she read the acceptance letter. They had worked so hard for this moment. Clara had practiced for years, entered every competition she could find, and won enough scholarships to make the tuition almost affordable. Almost. Her mother took out loans to cover the rest. She worked double shifts at the hospital where she was a nurse. She never complained. Not once. She just kept saying that watching Clara perform on a big stage one day would make it all worth it. But life has a way of breaking the plans we make so carefully. In Clara's third year at music school, her mother got sick. It started with tiredness, then headaches, then something much worse. The doctors found a tumor. The surgeries, the treatments, the hospital stays, they cost more money than Clara could have ever imagined. The scholarships covered school, but they couldn't cover her mother's medical bills. Clara tried to do both. She went to classes during the day and worked at a restaurant at night. She barely slept. She watched her mother get weaker and weaker, while the bills piled up higher and higher. And then one day, she had to make a choice. She dropped out of music school with just one semester left before graduation. Her mother begged her not to. Even from her hospital bed, she cried and told Clara to go back, to finish what she started. But Clara couldn't. She couldn't sit in a classroom playing Mozart while her mother was fighting for her life. So, she left school and took more shifts at the restaurant. She sold the few nice things they owned. She did everything she could. In the end, it wasn't enough to save her mother. But it was enough to keep her comfortable in her final months. Clara was holding her hand when she passed away on a cold night in February. After that, Clara felt like a part of her had died too. She still had the old piano in the apartment, but she couldn't bring herself to play it. Every time she looked at it, she thought of her mother sitting in the corner of the room, smiling and listening. The silence was too heavy. Months went by. Clara kept working at the restaurant. She paid off what she could of the debt and tried not to think about the future. She was surviving, but she wasn't really living. Then one day, she walked past a small community center in her neighborhood. Through the window, she saw an old piano sitting in the corner of a room. It looked forgotten, covered in a thin layer of dust. Something about it made her stop. She stood there for a long time, just looking at it. The next week, she went inside and asked if anyone used the piano. The woman at the front desk said no. Not really. Sometimes kids came in after school, but no one knew how to play. Clara offered to teach them for free. She didn't know why she said it. The words just came out. Maybe she needed something to fill the empty space inside her. Maybe she thought it was what her mother would have wanted. So every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after her shift at the restaurant, Clara went to the community center and taught piano to whoever showed up. Most of the kids came from families who couldn't afford lessons. Some of them had never touched a piano before. Clara didn't care if they were talented or not. She just wanted to share the one thing that had always brought her peace. It wasn't Carnegie Hall. It wasn't the dream she had imagined. But sitting with those kids, watching their faces light up when they played their first simple song, Clara started to feel something again. It was small, like a tiny flame in a dark room. But it was there. One Tuesday evening in October, It was raining hard outside. The kind of rain that makes you want to stay home, under a blanket. Clara didn't expect anyone to show up. She sat at the piano alone, playing softly to herself for the first time in a long time. She played one of her mother's favorite songs, and for a few minutes, she forgot where she was. Then she heard the door open. A woman walked in, shaking the rain off her umbrella. She was maybe 50 years old, wearing a simple coat and looking a little unsure of herself. But it was the small boy beside her that caught Clara's attention. He was about 8 years old, with dark hair and a serious face. He held onto the woman's arm tightly as they walked. His eyes were open, but they didn't focus on anything. They had a cloudy, distant look. Clara understood immediately. The boy was blind. The woman smiled nervously. "I'm sorry to bother you. We were walking by, and he heard the music. He wouldn't stop asking to come inside." 170. Clara looked at the boy. He had turned his head toward the piano, like he was trying to see it with his ears instead of his eyes. "It's not a bother at all," Clara said. "What's your name?" The boy didn't answer right away. He seemed shy, like he wasn't used to strangers talking to him. "His name is Leo," the woman said. "I'm Mrs. Walsh. I take care of him." Clara knelt down so she was closer to Leo's height. "Hi, Leo. Do you like music?" The boy nodded slowly. "It sounds like colors," he said quietly. "Even though I can't see colors. That's what my mom used to say." Clara felt her heart squeeze. "Used to?" Mrs. Walsh shook her head slightly, a sad look in her eyes. Clara understood. She didn't ask anything more. "Would you like to touch the piano?" Clara asked gently. Leo's face changed. For the first time, he looked almost excited. "Can I?" "Of course you can." Clara took his hand carefully and led him to the piano. She guided his fingers to the keys and let him feel them. He pressed one key, then another. Each note rang out in the quiet room. Leo smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "It feels like magic," he whispered. Clara sat down beside him. "Do you want me to teach you how to play?" Leo turned his face toward her voice. "Really?" Clara said. "If you want to learn, I'll teach you." Mrs. Walsh watched from near the door, her eyes getting wet. That rainy Tuesday evening, Clara had no idea that this moment would change the direction of her entire life. She didn't know who Leo really was. She didn't know about the father who had buried himself in work and guilt. She didn't know about the fortune, the empire, or the man who would soon be watching her from the shadows. All she knew was that a blind boy had walked into her life and asked to learn piano, and she had said yes. Sometimes, that's all it takes. One small yes to change everything. The following Tuesday, Clara didn't expect Leo to come back. She figured it had been a one-time thing. A rainy evening. A curious boy. A few minutes at the piano. Nice, but temporary. Most things in her life felt temporary these days. But when she walked into the community center that evening, Leo was already there. He was sitting on a chair near the window, with Mrs. Walsh beside him. His small hands were folded in his lap, and his head was tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. When Clara opened the door, Leo turned toward the sound immediately. "Is that her?" he asked Mrs. Walsh. "Is that the piano lady?" Mrs. Walsh smiled. "Yes, Leo." Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. She walked over and sat down next to him. "You came back. You said you would teach me," Leo said. There was no demand in his voice, just hope, pure, simple hope. "I've been thinking about it all week. I even dreamed about the piano." Clara looked at Mrs. Walsh, who gave her a small nod. "He hasn't stopped talking about it," the older woman said quietly. "I haven't seen him this excited about anything in a very long time." End for. Oh Zeno. Creaksing dew. That was all Clara needed to hear. She took Leo's hand, and led him to the piano. She helped him sit on the bench and positioned his fingers on the keys. Then she sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Okay," she said. "Let's start with something simple. This is called middle C. It's right in the center of the piano. Can you feel it?" Leo pressed the key. The note rang out clear and bright. He smiled. "Good. Now, I want you to remember where that key is. It's going to be your home base. Whenever you get lost, you come back to middle C. Okay?" Leo nodded seriously, like she had just told him the most important secret in the world. They spent the next hour going through the basics. Clara taught him the names of the white keys first. She made up little stories for each one to help him remember. C was the cat, sitting in the center. D was the dog next door. E was the elephant who lived at the end of the street. Leo laughed at her silly stories, and the sound of his laughter filled the room in a way that made Clara's heart feel lighter than it had in months. She noticed something about Leo as they practiced. He was a quick learner. But more than that, he listened in a way that most people don't. When she played a note, he didn't just hear it, he felt it. He leaned into the sound, like it was telling him something. His face would change with each different tone, sometimes peaceful, sometimes curious, sometimes sad. "You hear music differently than most people," Clara said at the end of the lesson. Leo thought about that for a moment. "My mom used to say that when you can't see, your ears learn to see for you. She said I could hear things other people miss." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She sounds like she was a smart woman. "She was," Leo said quietly. "She used to sing to me every night before bed. Even when she was sick, she still sang. I'm Scram, and the day of way. I'm C." Clara didn't ask how his mother died. She didn't need to know the details. She understood loss well enough to know that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just sit with someone in their sadness, without asking them to explain it. "I bet she had a beautiful voice," Clara said. Leo nodded. "She did. I miss it every day." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Clara put her hand gently on his shoulder. "Well, whenever you miss her, you can come here and play. Music has a way of keeping people close, even when they're gone." Leo turned his face toward her. His cloudy eyes couldn't see her, but somehow, it felt like he was looking right into her soul. "Do you miss someone too?" he asked. Clara was surprised by the question. She didn't talk about her mother much. It still hurt too much. But something about Leo made her want to be honest. "Yes," she said. "I miss my mom. She passed away a little over a year ago." "I'm sorry," Leo said. And the way he said it, Clara knew he really meant it. He understood. "Thank you," she said. "I think she would have liked you, Leo. She always loved teaching kids about music." Leo smiled. "Maybe they're friends now. Your mom and my mom. Up there somewhere, listening to us play." Clara had to blink back tears. "Maybe they are." From that day on, Leo came to the community center every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. Mrs. Walsh would bring him right after school, and he would wait by the door until Clara arrived. Rain or shine, hot or cold, he never missed a lesson. Clara started looking forward to those evenings more than anything else in her week. Her job at the restaurant was exhausting. The customers were often rude, the hours were long, and the pay was barely enough to cover her rent. But when she sat down at the piano with Leo, all of that faded away. For those 2 hours, twice a week, she remembered why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. Leo made progress faster than she expected. Within a month, he could play simple songs with both hands. His fingers had learned the geography of the keys. He knew exactly where each note lived, and he moved between them with growing confidence. But what impressed Clara most wasn't his technical skill. It was the emotion he put into every note. When Leo played, you could feel something. Even a simple nursery rhyme sounded different when he played it. There was depth there, a kind of feeling that couldn't be taught. "You have a gift," Clara told him one evening. "Seriously, Leo, you have something special." Leo shook his head. "It's not me, it's you. You make the piano make sense. Before, music was just sounds, but you turned it into a language. You taught me how to speak it." Clara didn't know what to say. She had never thought of herself as a good teacher. She had dropped out of music school. She had given up on her dreams. She was just a waitress who played piano at a community center for free. But to Leo, she was something more. Maybe that was enough. One Thursday evening, about 6 weeks after Leo first walked into the community center, Clara noticed something strange. There was a man standing near the back of the room. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and he stood very still. She hadn't seen him come in. He didn't say anything or move closer. He just watched. At first, Clara thought maybe he was a parent waiting for one of the other kids. But none of the other children were there that evening. It was just her and Leo. She tried to focus on the lesson, but she kept glancing at the man. There was something intense about the way he looked at Leo. Not threatening, exactly, but deeply focused. Like he was studying him. When the lesson ended, Clara walked Leo to the door where Mrs. Walsh was waiting. She glanced back at the man, but he was already gone. The back door was just swinging shut. "Mrs. Walsh," Clara said quietly. "Did you see that man? The one standing in the back?" Mrs. Walsh's face changed for just a second. Something flickered in her eyes. But then she smiled and shook her head. "I didn't notice anyone. Probably just someone looking for directions." Clara wasn't convinced, but she let it go. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the man in the dark coat. Something about him felt familiar, though she was certain she had never seen him before. And the way he had looked at Leo, it wasn't the look of a stranger. It was the look of someone who knew him. Clara told herself she was overthinking things. It was probably nothing. Just a random person who wandered in and left. But deep down, she had a feeling that the man would be back. She just didn't know how right she was. Vincent Cole was not a man who liked to feel powerless. He had built his entire life around control. Control over his business. Control over his schedule. Control over every deal, every meeting, every decision. By the age of 42, he had turned a small tech startup into a company worth over $4 billion. Magazines wrote about him. Investors wanted to be him. He had everything a man could want, except the one thing money couldn't buy. 3 years ago, his wife had died. Her name was Grace, and she was the only person who had ever made Vincent feel like more than just a businessman. She was warm, where he was cold. She laughed easily. She saw beauty in small things, and she loved their son more than anything in the world. When the doctors told them that Leo would be born blind, Vincent didn't know how to handle it. He had no experience with disability. He didn't know what to say or do. But Grace never hesitated. She held their baby boy and promised him that his life would be full of wonder. She said she would teach him to see the world in his own way. And she did. For 5 beautiful years, Grace filled Leo's world with music and stories and love. She sang to him every night. She described colors by comparing them to feelings. Blue was calm, like floating in water. Red was exciting, like your heart beating fast. Yellow was warm, like sunshine on your face. Vincent watched from the sidelines. He loved his son, but he didn't know how to connect with him. Work was easier. So he spent more and more time at the office, telling himself it was for his family's future. Then Grace got sick. It happened fast. 1 month she was fine, and the next she was in the hospital. Vincent hired the best doctors in the country. He flew in specialists from Europe. He would have given every penny he had to save her. But some things can't be bought. Grace died on a spring morning while the sun was coming through the hospital window. Leo was holding her hand. He couldn't see her face, But he knew. He felt her go. Vincent stood in the corner of the room, frozen. He wanted to comfort his son, but he didn't know how. He had never learned. Grace had always been the one who knew what to say, how to hold him, how to make things okay. After the funeral, Vincent did what he always did when life became too painful. He buried himself in work. He told himself that Leo had the best care money could provide. Mrs. Walsh had been with the family for years. She was kind and patient. She would take care of Leo, while Vincent kept the company running. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Vincent barely saw his son. When he came home late at night, Leo was already asleep. When he left early in the morning, Leo was still in bed. They lived in the same house, but existed in different worlds. Sometimes Vincent would stand outside Leo's bedroom door, listening. He could hear Mrs. Walsh reading to him, or Leo talking to himself, or silence that felt heavier than it should. He wanted to go in. He wanted to sit beside his son and say something, anything, but he never did. He didn't know where to start. The guilt ate at him slowly, like rust on metal. He knew he was failing as a father. He knew Leo needed him. But every time he tried to get close, he saw Grace's face. He remembered all the things she used to do, all the ways she made Leo smile, and he felt completely inadequate. So he stayed away. It was easier that way. Or at least, that's what he told himself. One evening, about 2 months after Grace would have turned 40, Mrs. Walsh said something that made Vincent stop in his tracks. "Leo smiled today," she said. Really smiled. For the first time in a long time. Vincent looked up from his laptop. "What happened?" Mrs. Walsh hesitated. "There's a young woman at the community center near the park. She teaches piano for free. Leo heard her playing a few weeks ago, and he asked to go inside. She's been teaching him ever since." Vincent frowned. "A community center? Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't think you'd want to be bothered with it," Mrs. Walsh said carefully. "You've been so busy." The words stung more than Vincent wanted to admit. He had been so absent that even his staff didn't think he'd care about his own son's happiness. "I want to see this," Vincent said. "The next time Leo has a lesson, I want to be there." Mrs. Walsh looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, sir." The following Tuesday, Vincent left work early for the first time in months. He put on a plain coat, nothing flashy, and drove himself to the community center. He didn't want to be recognized. He didn't want anyone making a fuss. He just wanted to see what was happening with his son. He slipped in through a side door and stood at the back of the room, half hidden in the shadows. The space was small and simple. The walls needed paint. The floors were old, nothing like the world Vincent was used to. But there, at an old piano in the corner, was his son. And beside him was a young woman with kind eyes and patient hands. Vincent watched as she guided Leo's fingers across the keys. She didn't rush him. She didn't get frustrated when he made mistakes. She laughed with him, encouraged him, and spoke to him like he was the most important person in the room. "That was great, Leo," she said, after he finished a simple melody. "You're getting better every week. I'm really proud of you." Leo's face lit up in a way Vincent hadn't seen in years. "Do you think my mom would be proud too?" The young woman paused. Then she put her hand gently on Leo's shoulder. "I think your mom is watching right now. And I think she's smiling." Vincent felt something crack open inside his chest. He had to look away for a moment. His eyes were burning, and he couldn't remember the last time he had cried. This stranger, this woman he had never met, was doing something he had failed to do. She was making his son feel loved. She was making him feel seen. She wasn't being paid. She wasn't doing it for recognition. She was just there, giving Leo her time and her heart. Vincent stayed until the end of the lesson. He watched as the young woman walked Leo to the door and said goodbye with a warm smile. He watched as Mrs. Walsh took Leo's hand and led him out to the car. And then he left through the back door, unseen, He came back the next week, and the week after that. He never said anything. He never introduced himself. He just stood in the back and watched. Each time, he saw the same thing: a patient teacher, a happy student, a connection built on nothing but kindness and music. And each time, the guilt inside Vincent grew heavier. He had given Leo everything money could buy: the best schools, the best doctors, the best house, the best staff. But he had never given him the one thing that mattered most: himself. One night, after watching another lesson, Vincent sat alone in his study with a glass of water. He looked at a photo of Grace on his desk. She was smiling, holding Leo as a baby. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the photo. "I've been a coward." He didn't know how to fix things. He didn't know if Leo would even want him around after all this time. But he knew he couldn't keep hiding. He couldn't keep letting a stranger do the job he was supposed to do. He had to try. For Leo, for Grace, and for himself. The next time he went to the community center, Vincent decided he wouldn't stand in the shadows anymore. It was time for his son to see him, even if Leo couldn't actually see. It was time to stop running. It was a cold Thursday evening in late November. The wind outside was sharp, and most people had hurried home to escape the chill. But inside the community center, it was warm. Clara had brought a small space heater from her apartment because the old building's heating system barely worked. Leo was sitting at the piano, practicing a piece he had been working on for 2 weeks. It was a simple melody, but he played it with so much feeling that it sounded like something much more. Clara sat beside him, listening quietly, letting him find his way through the notes on his own. When he finished, he sat very still for a moment. His hands stayed on the keys, not moving. "Clara," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "You can ask me anything." Leo took a breath. His face looked serious, older than his 8 years. "Do you think my dad loves me?" "Leo." The question hit Clara like a wave. She didn't know much about Leo's father. Leo rarely talked about him. Mrs. Walsh had mentioned once that Leo's father was a busy man, always working. But that was all Clara knew. She had assumed he was just another overworked parent trying to make ends meet. "Why do you ask that?" Clara said gently. Leo shrugged, but it wasn't a casual shrug. It was the kind that comes when you're trying to pretend something doesn't hurt. "He's never around. I hear him sometimes, late at night, when he comes home, his footsteps. But he never comes into my room. He never talks to me." Clara felt her heart break a little. She thought of her own mother, how she had always been there, always present, even when money was tight and life was hard. She couldn't imagine growing up feeling invisible to her own parent. "Leo," she said carefully, "I think sometimes grown-ups get lost in their own sadness. When they lose someone they love, they don't always know how to handle it. And sometimes, even though they love their kids very much, they pull away because they're scared." "Scared of what?" Leo asked. Clara thought about it. Maybe scared of not being good enough. Maybe scared that they'll make things worse instead of better. Maybe they look at their child and see the person they lost, and it hurts too much. Leo was quiet for a long moment. "My mom used to say that my dad loves me, even if he doesn't know how to show it. She said, I should be patient with him." "Your mom sounds like she was very wise," Clara said. "She was," Leo said. "I just wish he would try. Even a little bit. I don't need him to be perfect. I just want him to be there." Clara put her arm around Leo's shoulders. She didn't have the right words. She couldn't fix this for him. All she could do was be there, in that moment, and let him know he wasn't alone. What neither of them knew was that Vincent was standing at the back of the room. He had arrived early, slipping in through the side door as usual. He had heard everything, every single word. He stood frozen, his back against the wall, his chest so tight he could barely breathe. His son's voice echoed in his mind. I just want him to be there. Such a simple wish. Such a small thing to ask. And yet Vincent had failed to give it. He thought about all the nights he had stood outside Leo's bedroom door, too afraid to go in. He thought about all the mornings he had left before sunrise, telling himself it was for the family, for the future. He thought about all the birthdays and holidays and ordinary days he had missed, because work felt safer than facing his own grief. And now he was hearing his son ask a stranger whether his own father loved him. Vincent wanted to leave. He wanted to slip out the back door and pretend he hadn't heard any of it. That would be easier. That's what he had always done. Run from the hard things. Hide behind his money and his business and his busy schedule. But something stopped him. Maybe it was Grace's voice in his head, telling him to be braver. Maybe it was the sight of Clara holding his son with such tenderness. Maybe it was just time. Time to stop being a coward. He waited until the lesson ended. He watched Clara walk Leo to the door, where Mrs. Walsh was waiting. He saw her whisper something in Leo's ear that made him smile. Then she waved goodbye and turned back toward the piano. That's when Vincent stepped forward. Clara noticed him immediately. The man in the dark coat. The one she had seen, watching from the back of the room several times before. Her guard went up. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was polite but cautious. Vincent walked closer, stopping a few feet away from her. Up close, Clara could see that he was well dressed in a way that looked expensive, but understated. His face was tired, like he hadn't slept well in a long time, but his eyes were what caught her attention. They were filled with something heavy. Pain. Maybe. Or regret. "You're the one who's been teaching Leo," he said. "Yes," Clara said slowly. "Who are you?" Vincent took a breath. "I'm his father." Clara stared at him. For a moment, she didn't understand. Leo's father? This man who looked like he stepped out of a business magazine? She had pictured someone different. Someone struggling, maybe. "You're Leo's father," she repeated. "Yes." Clara didn't know what to say. 100 thoughts raced through her mind. This was the man Leo talked about with such sadness. The man who was never there. The man who didn't come into his son's room or talk to him or hold him. And suddenly, Clara wasn't nervous anymore. She was angry. "So you're the one who's too busy to spend time with your own child," she said. Her voice was steady but sharp. Vincent flinched. "I deserve that. Leo asked me tonight if you love him," Clara continued. She didn't care if this man was rich, or powerful, or important. "He asked me, a stranger, because he doesn't know the answer himself. Do you have any idea how that feels for a little boy? To wonder if his own father cares about him?" Vincent looked down. "I heard him," he said quietly. "I was standing in the back. I heard everything." Clara shook her head. "Then, why are you telling me? Why aren't you telling him?" "Why? Why aren't you telling him?" "Because I don't know how," Vincent admitted. His voice cracked slightly. "I haven't known how since his mother died. She was the one who knew what to do. She was the one who held everything together. Without her, I'm lost. I look at Leo, and I see her. I see everything. I couldn't save, and it hurts so much that I run away." Clara's anger softened, but only a little. She understood grief. She understood how it could make you do things you weren't proud of. But she also understood what it felt like to be a child who needed a parent. "Leo doesn't need you to be perfect," she said. "He told me that himself. He just needs you to show up. To try. That's all he's asking for." Vincent nodded slowly. "I know. I've wasted so much time. I've let fear make my decisions for me. But I don't want to do that anymore." He looked at Clara, and for the first time, she saw something like hope in his eyes. "You've given my son something I couldn't," he said. "You made him feel seen. You made him feel like he matters. And I will never be able to thank you enough for that." Clara didn't know how to respond. She hadn't done anything special. She had just treated Leo the way every child deserved to be treated. "Don't thank me," she said finally. "Just be there for him. That's all the thanks I need." Vincent nodded again. "I will. I promise. Starting now." He turned and walked toward the door. Then he stopped and looked back at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she said. Vincent gave her a small, sad smile. "Thank you, Clara, for everything." Then he was gone, stepping out into the cold night, ready to finally become the father his son needed. And Clara stood alone in the quiet room, wondering how one simple yes to a blind boy had led her here, to this moment, to a story so much bigger than she ever imagined. The next Tuesday, Clara arrived at the community center expecting the usual routine. She would set up, warm up the piano, and wait for Leo and Mrs. Walsh to arrive. But when she walked through the door, she stopped in her tracks. Leo was already there, and sitting beside him on the piano bench was Vincent. They weren't playing. They were just sitting together, close enough that their shoulders touched. Vincent was saying something in a low voice, and Leo was listening with his whole body, the way he always did. Then Leo laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and surprised, like he couldn't quite believe what was happening. Clara stood by the door, not wanting to interrupt. She watched as Vincent carefully took Leo's hand and placed it on the keys. "Okay," Vincent said. "Show me what you've learned." Leo hesitated. "You really want to hear?" "More than anything," Vincent said. And he meant it. Clara could hear it in his voice. Leo took a breath and began to play. It was the same melody he had been practicing for weeks, but somehow it sounded different now. Fuller, happier. Like the music itself knew that something had changed. When he finished, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then, he put his arm around his son and pulled him close. "That was beautiful, Leo," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Leo leaned into his father's embrace. "You really think so?" "I know so," Vincent said. "And I'm proud of you too. I should have told you that a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She quietly wiped them away and walked over to the piano. "Room for one more?" she asked softly. Leo turned toward her voice and smiled. "Clara, Dad came to my lesson. He said he wants to learn too." Clara looked at Vincent. He seemed different than the man she had confronted last week. The heaviness was still there, but there was something else now. A softness, a willingness to try. "Is that true?" she asked. "You want to learn piano?" Vincent shrugged, almost shyly. "I figured if my son can do it, maybe I should give it a shot. If you'll have me as a student." Quote, Clara couldn't help but smile. "I think we can make room." That evening, Clara taught both of them. She showed Vincent the basics, while Leo helped explain things in his own way. It was clumsy and awkward and wonderful. Vincent hit wrong notes constantly. His fingers were stiff and unsure. But he kept trying. And every time he made a mistake, Leo would encourage him. "It's okay, Dad. I messed up a lot at first too." Clara says mistakes are just part of learning. Vincent looked at his son with something like wonder. "When did you get so wise?" "Mom taught me," Leo said simply. And Clara helped me remember. From that day forward, Vincent came to every lesson. He rearranged his entire schedule. He told his assistant to hold all calls on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Nothing was more important than being there. At first, the other kids at the community center were curious about the tall man in the nice coat who kept showing up. But Vincent never acted like he was better than anyone. He sat on the same old benches. He drank water from the same plastic cups. He talked to the other parents and listened to their stories. Slowly, people stopped noticing his expensive watch and started seeing him as just another dad trying to be there for his kid. Weeks turned into months. Winter melted into spring. Leo's playing improved dramatically, but more importantly, so did his spirit. He smiled more. He laughed more. He started talking about his mother without that heavy sadness in his voice. The wound was still there, but it was healing. One evening in early April, Vincent asked Clara to stay after the lesson. Leo was outside with Mrs. Walsh, enjoying the warmer weather. "I want to talk to you about something," Vincent said. Clara felt a flicker of nervousness. "Okay." Vincent reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. "I've been thinking about this place. About what you do here. You're changing lives, Clara. Not just Leo's. All these kids who come through here, you give them something they can't get anywhere else." Clara unfolded the paper. It was a sketch of a building. A real building. With practice rooms, and a small concert hall, and offices. At the top, in neat handwriting, were the words, Harmony House Music Academy. "What is this?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a music school," Vincent said. "For kids who can't afford lessons. A real school, with real teachers, and real instruments. I want to build it, and I want you to run it." Clara stared at him. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not charity," Vincent said firmly. "In everything you've been doing for free because no one else would." He paused. "You gave my son his smile back. You gave me a second chance to be his father. This is the least I can do." Clara looked down at the sketch again. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed everything so Clara could follow her dream. She thought about dropping out of music school, about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering if she had made the right choice. She thought about the old piano in her apartment that she still couldn't bring herself to sell. And she thought about Leo, and all the other kids like him, who just needed someone to believe in them. "I don't know what to say," she said. "Say yes," Vincent said. "Let me help you build something that matters." Clara took a deep breath. Then she nodded. 1 year later, Harmony House Music Academy opened its doors in a renovated building just 3 blocks from the old community center. It had 10 practice rooms, a small concert hall, and a staff of dedicated teachers who believed that every child deserved access to music. Clara stood in the lobby on opening day, watching families stream through the doors. Kids of all ages, from all backgrounds, their eyes wide with excitement. Parents who had never been able to afford lessons, finally able to give their children this gift. And at the center of it all was Leo. He was 9 years old now, taller and more confident. He walked to the small stage in the concert hall with his father by his side. Vincent helped him to the piano bench, then stepped back. The room fell silent. Leo placed his fingers on the keys. And then, he began to play. It was a piece he had composed himself. He called it, "The Teacher Who Saw Me." It was simple and beautiful, full of hope and gratitude and love. The notes floated through the room like sunlight through a window. Clara stood in the back, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to wipe them away. When Leo finished, the room erupted in applause. He stood and bowed, his face glowing with pride. Vincent was clapping harder than anyone, his eyes red and wet. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone and the building was quiet, Clara sat alone at one of the pianos. She played softly, just for herself, the way she used to when she was a little girl in her mother's apartment. Vincent found her there. He stood in the doorway, listening. "You know," he said quietly, "you never made it to Carnegie Hall. But I think you ended up somewhere better." Clara smiled. "I think so too." She looked around the room, at the walls that would soon be filled with the sound of children learning to play, at the future that was just beginning. She had said yes to a blind boy on a rainy Tuesday evening. She had no idea it would lead her here, but that's how the best stories work. They start with one small act of kindness and grow into something bigger than you ever imagined. And this story was only just beginning.